I now have the privilege of introducing Dr. Brian Domitrovic. Brian Domitrovic holds a PhD in history from Harvard University, where he also did graduate work in economics. He is chairman of the Department of History at Sam Houston State University. Dr. Domitrovic is now a weekly columnist for Forbes magazine and has published many popular works, including the recent book Iconoclasts, which reveals the foundations of Americans' prosperity. Brian has lectured at our programs and is a contributor to our online journal, The Imaginative Conservative. Please welcome Dr. Domitrovic.
Thank you very much, John. Thanks, Winston. Before I begin, I really want to remark how inspiring Bob McNair's remarks have always been at this breakfast. I remember in 2007, when we still thought we were enjoying the fruits of prosperity, that Bob McNair said, one of the problems we have in our prosperity is that we're all kind of enjoying affluence in America, but we're not getting civically educated. And it seems to me now that we don't have either one. We're not getting civically educated in the United States, nor do we have our prosperity. I don't think America can be America without being both prosperous and to have a robust experience with civic education. And so I really must say that Mr. McNair's remarks have given great sustenance to me over the years coming to this breakfast, and it's time to win on both fronts. Let's have prosperity and civic education in America over the upcoming years. I want to talk a little bit about the history of economic crisis. I happen to be an expert in that area. I thought when I wrote my book, Iconoclasts, which is a history of supply-side economics, that is to say, the economics that gave us the Reagan Revolution, I thought when I wrote this book a couple of years ago that it would be something that people would read at their leisure because we'd always be enjoying our prosperity. Well, it turns out that the history of economic crisis happens to be the most important topic in the history of the world about now. And we have to figure out how to get out of this dad-blamed Great Recession. And all I'd like to tell you is that the verdict of history has been definitive. And I've studied all the economic crises in our American history. There's only one way in our 20th and 21st century that we have ever gotten out of economic crisis. Only one way. And that is we have restrained the governmental institutions that have caused the recession. Specifically, we have restrained the institutions of 1913. Did you know that in that one year, 1913, both the Federal Reserve and the income tax were created? That was quite some year. It might be the most significant year in modern American history, the creation of the Fed and the income tax. Immediately after 1913, the growth rate plummeted to 1.4% over the next decade. 1.4% from 1913 to 1921, while the price level doubled. The price level in the 19th century had not increased at all, and all of a sudden it went up 100%. The income tax, which hadn't even existed before 1913, was at 77% in 1917. The United States experienced the worst depression in its history. What happened? Warren Harding won the presidency in 1920, appointed Andrew Mellon the Secretary of the Treasury. Mellon instructed the Federal Reserve to tighten money, to stabilize the price level, and the taxes were cut down to 77 to 25%. The roaring 20s ensued. In the early 1930s, the United States reversed this policy mix, made the Fed activist, increased the marginal rate of the income tax up to 63%. Franklin Roosevelt took that to 79% while maintaining an activist Fed. Great Depression for 10 years. People claim that World War II got the United States out of the Great Depression. That's false. When the United States reestablished the gold standard in 1944 with Bretton Woods and then cut taxes in 1947-48, that's when the trough occurred in 1947 and the great takeoff of post-war prosperity began. In the 1950s, growth started to slow as Dwight Eisenhower didn't want to cut the top rate of the income tax, which was, no kidding, no misprint, 91%. There were 3 recessions under that 91% income tax rate in the 1950s. Finally, John Kennedy came into office. His advisors said, you'll never guess what John Kennedy's advisors said when he inherited a recession in 1960. I think you should raise taxes and loosen money. That's what his advisor said. James Tobin from Yale, Paul Samuelson from MIT, loosen money and raise taxes. John Kennedy listened to that for a few years, 1961, 62, turned on his heels, tightened money, cut taxes. Growth was 5.1% for the next 7 years, every year. In the 1970s, the United States reversed the policy mix again. loosened money like crazy. There was a 300% inflation in the United States from 1969 to 1982. Real tax rates went up over 100%. That's not a misprint either. The capital gains rate, which was statutorily at 50% in the 1970s, taxed nominal gains. And if the inflation rate went up 300%, then that means you were paying taxes on losses. So tax rates were over 100%, and there was a huge increase in the price level. Ronald Reagan came into office. He told the Federal Reserve, get your act together and stabilize the dollar, and we're going to cut tax rates by 30%. Boom, 4.5% growth for the next 7 years. Bill Clinton roughly maintained this consensus, and we have maintained it until the present time in the 2000s, when we decided to get the Federal Reserve activist again and entertain major tax increases, such are implied in Obamacare. The lessons of history are abundantly clear. Modern recessions are caused by the aggressive use of the institutions of 1913, the income tax, and the Federal Reserve. And there is only one way, history shows, that economic crisis has been solved, and that is by restricting the influence of the institutions of 1913. We have to get the Fed under control today. I'm on the Economic Policy Board of Herman Cain for President, and believe me, we're going to roll out a monetary policy that's worthy of America's prosperity. We also need to cut taxes. You know what's going to happen? 19th century rates of growth in the United States, 5% per year. So it's time to get optimistic again. We know how to solve economic crisis. We can do it again, and I look forward to being part of the solution. Thanks in great part to the Free Enterprise Institute. Thank you.